Testing my mic here. That sounds about good enough. Let me adjust my mic here and excuse me. Yeah, let's switch my overlay now. And there we go. We are officially live. So we're gonna continue with the HTML and CSS course we started yesterday. We're on day 2 now, and I'm excited for all the things that we're about to learn today. Why is my camera slanted? Let me just fix that. At least try to fix that. Okay, this looks good enough. Yeah, let's begin. Let me just. All right, great. Wait a second. Let me just. Yeah. So yesterday we left off at the part. I think we were midway through making this window website. We left off at exactly the 2 hour mark. So
Do
let's
you wish to move your data
that.
science career outside India? Apart from the high pay.
Yeah.
Line items. And we can say, well, flex items, they should be centered.
We were like discussing about Flexbox and its properties. Go live. And why does it always start in edge? Anyway, even though there we go. Yeah. Let's see what we can do here. Yeah, so with the help of Flexbox, we were able to align these 3 link items which were coming off as a list, and we added a space between. If we comment this out, you'll see what I mean. So we added this to add that space in between, for lack of a better word. And then what else did we do? We rest of it is just you know normal CSS stuff. And yeah, the header, yeah, we made this. We set the display property as flex, align item sender. What happens if you Hey, yeah, the reason that we did it sender was, I think, because it goes up. Like, I don't know if it's noticeable, but if you look closely, it's the position of these 3 links over here is a bit upwards, whereas it should be in sender. Yeah, that's how we used Flexbox. And for the links, for them to not show that bullet point thing, we set list style as none. And we also added the Flexbox property for that. With that being said, let's resume.
Vertically. Right, so now they are centered vertically. And we can also determine how they should sit horizontally. Right, so maybe, well, not maybe, we know that they should be sitting, apart from themselves. Right, so the list should sit all the way here. The logo should also sit all the way here, right? So we have another property in Flexbox that can deal with the horizontal axis, right? So we have align items for the vertical here, and here we use justify content for the horizontal axis. And here we actually have a property called, or value called space between. And the name already says it will put as much space between the flex items as possible, right? So this is a very powerful module in CSS called Flexbox. You don't have to understand this right now, but this is basically the go-to way of doing layouts in CSS. So whenever you run into an issue of layouts, you want to use Flexbox most of the time. Okay, now the problem here, of course, is that the logo is sitting right against the edge here, and the list is sitting right against the edge here as well. In the example, we are constraining the width of the entire page here, basically, right? So they should not be sitting here at the edge.
Yeah.
So what we can do is we can give the header simply a width, right? So we can give each element a height and width if we want that. So the width here should basically be 1150 pixels. right? So then the entire header is 1150 pixels. And let's see, let me actually zoom in a little bit here so you can see it a little bit better. So now
let's full screen this. Okay.
now the header,
We can set a margin towards the left, right? So that the window is also
well, it has
like
a
a
certain
bit,
width, but we want it to
little
sit in
bit
the center, of
towards
course,
the
right?
right.
So here we can use that margin auto trick. So we can put as much margin on the right side and on the left side, which will basically center the content.
Okay, that's a better way to do it.
Right, so we can use margin left, auto, and margin right, auto. And we'll put as much margin on the left side as on the right side, which will automatically center the content. Right, so now we're sitting in the center. All right, so we are pretty much finished with the header here. Let's see if I missed anything. I don't think so. Yeah, so the header's looking good. The hover effect is working. The last thing we want to do here is when we load the page.
I need to enlarge this, don't I? If I, yeah, it adjusts accordingly, or adjusts. That's not such word as adjusts.
When we go to this page, there should actually be an introductory animation. So if we look at the example, if we load the page here, you can see it's not very smooth here because for some reason on Windows it's not smooth, but there is an animation here in the header. Right, so it starts off with an opacity of 0 actually. It's actually
The header has what?
animation. So if we look at the example, if we load the page here, you can see it's not very smooth here because for some reason on Windows it's not smooth, but there is an animation here in the header. Right, so it starts off with an opacity of 0 actually. It's actually invisible in the beginning and it moves upwards. Right. So what we can do,
right,
is we can use animation. Right, and animation we use keyframes for that. Right, so those are the steps of an animation. So what we can do under base styles, we can also have a separate section for all the animation or the steps for an animation for keyframes, but here we're only going to have one, so let's keep it a little bit simple. So we have add keyframes. This is a so-called add rule in CSS. Not very interesting in many ways, but this is simply how it's called in CSS. We can call it fade in, and we can say at 0%, well, the opacity should be 0, right? And at 100%, at the end of the animation, the opacity should simply be 1, right? So at the end, we should see, of course, the header, but in the beginning, it's hidden. And also, if you remember, it was moving upwards during the animation. So initially, it should start off a little bit lower, like from here, it should start somewhere here, and during the animation, it should move upwards, right? So to move an element, we can use transform, right? And here, we want to move them along the vertical axis. So we have translate Y. So initially, they should start off 15 pixels lower, right? And at the end, there should be, well, it should be in its original position, which is 0 movement, right? So 0 pixels. Now, by the way, in CSS, if you have 0, you don't have to specify the unit, right? So you can also leave off pixel here, pixels. Right, so these are the steps of the animation. Nothing will happen right now because we haven't applied the steps to any element yet. So now we actually have to go to the header, and here we're going to say animation. It's going to ask us, okay, so you want to have an animation, but what are the steps? Well, we call the steps fade in. So we're going to say fade in, and how long should the animation take? Well, we can say 0.5 seconds. All right, so if you save here, and now if we load the page, you can see a pretty cool intro animation, right? All right, that looks pretty cool already. That's
right.
All right, let's continue with the main part of this website. If you look at the example, we're going to have this heading. This is going to be the most important heading on the page. In fact, it's going to be the only heading. And then we have some text, paragraphs below there. And then we have this form with an input, right? If you click on it, it becomes a little bit brighter. And this button, which also has a very subtle hover effect. All right, let's go to our HTML to add the necessary markup for this. So here we have the header, right? And now we're going to go into the most important content on the page, here in the main. Right, so we have that heading. We're going to use an H1 tag for that. We're going to say find and book events anywhere. Right? And then below there, actually, let's give this a class before we go to the rest. So class is simply heading. And then we have some text below there. It's going to be a paragraph element with a class of text. So here we're going to say search through hundreds of events to find your next.
Actually, with VS Code, we can just do p.text, right? Yeah. Search through hundreds of events.
One period. Get your tickets safely through Evento. Right, so that's going to be the paragraph text here. Right, so then we have this. Right, so I hope you can get all of that. Search through hundreds of events to find your next one, period. Get your tickets safely through Evento. All right, now you can see Evento here is bolder than the rest of the text. And this is actually one other design tip that I want to give you. The thing with text is, the text can quickly look pretty plain. So one of the tricks you can do is to select parts of the text and make it, for example, italic, right, or bolder, or a different color. So one of the things we do here is we're going to select this part of the paragraph and we're going to make it a little bit bolder. So here we're going to, right, so we're going to, we need some way to select Evento here, so we're going to make
this. Oh, is it it's the strong tag, right? What does P use for second?
Element. Now here we can use div, right? If you remember that, we can say div divider. We're going to divide it up, right? So I'm going to copy that, paste that right here
We
around
can just
evento,
use the
right?
strong tag, right? We can use the strong tag.
Now, if we do this, evento is going to be on its own line, right? Because a div is going to be a block level element. Block level elements take up the entire line.
Yeah.
We don't want that. So the equivalent is a span here. Span is an inline level element. And with span, it can simply stay inline here, right? So we can give this a class because we want to style this. It should be bolder. So here it's also text. Now I like to, when it's just like a variant of the text, I like to make it text. And then with 2 dashes, we make it, we have the modifier. Basically, it should be bold. That's the class that we will give this. All right. So if you have all of that below here, then we're going to have that form. So we're going to have.
We're just gonna do exactly what he showed. Yeah. We don't want to repeat our. If you watched my earlier stream that I did today, I was stuck with a problem in PyTorch, which took almost the entirety of the stream to solve. So yeah, I don't want to repeat that. Okay. So we're gonna call this as text bold, right? Not strong, text bold. Actually, I can call it anything I want, but let's keep it as it is.
Form can have a class of simply form. Right, so I'm pressing tab here, by the way. Right, so when I go here, I was here, and press tab, you go here. Right, so we use tab for indentation. And then here in the form, we have that input. So we have input. And this should get a class of, well, simply input. And lastly, we have a button. And we can get this a class of btn. This is a common name for a class for a button. And the text in the button should be search. All right, so if you have all of that, I'm going to save here. Let's see what we get so far. All right, so this is what we have so far. Not particularly looking great. Now, if you look at the example, you can see there's already some text here in the input, right? This is called placeholder text. So I can type here, for example, Los Angeles, right? And then that placeholder text gets removed, but that's just automatic. So if the input is empty, the browser will show that placeholder text. So we can also set this in our HTML placeholder text, right? So right now it's empty. So what we can do is here for input, we can say the following. Right, so placeholder find events by city. For example, Austin. Right, so if you do this, you can see right now, of course, it's not styled yet, but you can already see the placeholder text. Right, so that's going to be the HTML for now. So let's see if that's everything. I think so. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to our CSS. So after the header, now we're going to have the main. So I like to add a comment here for some structure here in the file. And here we're going to select, well, let's just select all of the elements that we just created. So we're going to have .main, .heading, .text, .text dash dash bold, right? We want to have one part of the text to be a little bit bolder. And then we have the form. In the form, we have that input. And lastly, we have that button. Right, so if we save that, this is what we have right now. So let's see, let's actually.
We have .text bold. Form. Input. And then button. Or btn.
We have that input. And lastly, we have that button. Right, so if we save that, this is what we have right now. So let's see, let's actually start working on the overall layout. Right, so we want this to sit here in the center, right, both horizontally and vertically here in the center. So how can we make that work? And this is actually already a little bit, well, trickier, you could say. So one of the things we can do is simply say, well, the following. So what we have here in the main, we have text, right? If we want to center the text horizontally, we can use text align. Now we have to, we can use that on all, well, we can use that on a parent element, and it will set the, it will basically align the text or all its child elements that are text in the center. So if we go to main here, and we would say text align center, you can see now everything is in the center. Now we.
Okay. Let's do that then.
Also want this to push down to the bottom or
say.
towards the bottom here, right? So that it's somewhere here in the center. And actually, I don't want it to be perfectly here in the center. I like if it's a little bit higher. So we're just going to add some margin actually. Right, so this entire main part here, if we add some margin on the top, it will push this content downwards a little bit.
Yep.
So what we can say is margin on the top. We can also use padding, by the way, it'll work the same way. We can say 110 pixels. You can see it pushes it downwards a little bit.
But why not? Oh, because auto would like push it way more than auto doesn't push it at all. Oh, I think it's because and if you specify 110 pixels, then yeah. Okay, let's keep it as it is.
Okay, and let's continue working on the heading here. So we want the heading, it's just going to be a bunch of styles here. We want to have the heading have a font size of 64 pixels.
Where's dot heading? I don't think we've created it. Let's create that.
A font weight of pretty bold, 800. And let's see, it should have margin on the bottom of 25 pixels. Right, so it gets a little bit closer. Right, so the H1 has some default margin.
25 pixels. Let's see how the change took place. First, we change the font size, the font weight to make it a bit bolder, like it's going to come and punch at you. And then at the margin at the bottom to does that do anything? I guess it did. It lowered the margin. Maybe the margin was more at the bottom and 25 was less than what was said to be the default.
That was too much, so we reduced it a little bit so that the text is a little bit closer. Now we don't want it to be like one line like this, right? So we actually want it to wrap onto a new line. So it's 2 lines of text.
Yeah. So I think we can use the BR
So
tag,
way of
right,
doing
to
that
add
is
a
simply giving
line
this a
break.
maximum width, right? So if we tell this H1 you can be at most 500 pixels, for example, it will well when the
We can do that for sure. Yeah, why not? But can't we just add a line break? I think a line break is better, but again, we just follow the tutorial.
new word cannot fit, it will wrap onto a new line. So we have the actual property width, right? So we can set an actual width. We can also set a maximum width to 550 pixels. Now when you do that, the text align center will not work for this anymore. This is simply one of the rules of CSS. So now what we can use is that margin auto trick again, right? So on this heading, we're going to add as much margin on the left as on the right, which will center the content. So we can say margin left auto and margin right auto. Right, so now it's in the center again. Now one design trick again is when you have large text like this, the default styling is that these lines are going to be pretty far from each other, right? So you can see there's quite a lot of space between the lines here. And usually it looks better if you have large text when they're a little bit closer to each other. So we want to reduce the line height. So we can say line height. And I believe the default is 1.2, right? It actually doesn't use a unit. There's no unit here. So it's 1.2 is the default. We're going to set it to a little bit less, 0.9. It's going to be a little bit closer. I think it looks a little bit better. All right, and let's continue with the text below it. We can give this a font size of 24 pixels. Now, this text is now one line, right? Taking up the entire width here. We don't want that either. We also want this to wrap onto multiple lines. So we can also restrict its width here to, let's say, 630 pixels. All right. Now, for the same reason, we have to use margin auto here again. We can simply copy that and just paste it right here.
Let's just copy
now
these
also,
three and change
when you
it
have like a heading with text below it, this is very typical.
What is it? 630 pixels. Because we wanted to extend more than the title. Yeah, a bit. Anyways, yeah, there we go.
Okay. Now also, when you
Oh, look at that. We have a second viewer right now watching. Welcome to the stream.
Below it, this is very
How are you?
contrast, right? So you want to think about the hierarchy of your design. The heading should really be the most attention grabbing, and everything else should be a little bit de-emphasized. One way to de-emphasize this text here is to simply reduce its opacity. So we can say opacity, the default, what it has right now is 100% or 1. We're going to set it to 0.8.
Opacity of what?
Grabbing, and everything else should be a little bit de-emphasized. One way to de-emphasize this text here is to simply reduce its opacity. So we can say opacity, the default, what it has right now is 100% or 1. We're going to set it to 0.8.
Wait, let's see that. Oh, yeah. Huh. That does look better, doesn't it?
Right, so I also think it makes it blend in with the background and everything else a little bit better. Now, one other thing we can also do is with smaller text, it actually looks better if you increase the line height. Right, this also helps creating a contrast between the heading and the text. So we're going to say line height should be 1.4. Right, so that's a little bit more. Now, also here we have text bold, right? So we've wrapped evento in a span, and we want this to be bold, which means that the font weight should simply be a little bit more. Right, we can set it to 700. Okay, so then we get to the form, right? This is the form that we have here. We want a little bit more space, so we can say we can give it some margin on the top, right? So margin is really space between elements. So if we set it to 60 pixels, it's gonna add a little bit more space. And then we get to the actual input. Now you can see the input actually has some default styling. It has a background color of white. It has some width here. It actually has a border as well, although we don't see it very well here. But let's actually start working on the input. This is one of the last things we have to do here. So we say width. It should be 511 pixels wide. Why this weird number 511? Well, I just played around and I think this looked best. Right, so pretty wide. So we also have to increase the height or it's gonna look a little bit strange. Okay. Now these inputs, they have default styling and they actually have a border. We don't want that border, so we can say border none, right? We'll remove the border. And they also come with some padding as default. We want to remove that padding as well. So we can simply say padding 0 pixels or simply 0, right? So
What changes the padding do though? Oh, I see. It's subtle, but yeah.
So we have padding left, right? We can say padding left, padding top, padding right, padding bottom, right? For all of the 4 sides individually, or a shorthand is simply padding, right? If we set it to 0 pixels, it will be 0 for all sides, right? And since it's 0, you don't have to use the unit, right? I will use the unit for now. And right now it's very cornery, right? The corners are very sharp. So we also have border radius.
Around,
will make
right?
the borders curved.
Round,
right? A little bit better, I think.
Round radius, yeah.
Okay, we're also going to set the opacity to 0.8 because it should be a little bit see-through initially. And once you make it focused, we're going to make it 100% opacity. Okay, so right now the text is sitting right against the edge here, right? So if I search for Austin, it's right against the edge here, and the text is also a little bit small. Let's add some padding on the left. So it's not sitting right against the edge, 30 pixels. Right, so now it has a little bit more breathing room. And let's also set the font size to 17 pixels.
Okay.
All right. Now, one other thing is, which is a little bit strange with forms or inputs, this font right now is not using Leto, right? So if you look very closely, the font is actually still the default font. And this is simply because in forms, they don't automatically inherit the font family, for example, right? So here in body, we set the font family, right? And we expect all of the text to inherit that. Well, in forms, that is not automatically the case. So here for the input, we have to force it basically to inherit that font family. And there are some other font properties as well that it should inherit. So we can also just make it font. Which is actually a shorthand for all sorts of font properties. Right, so you can also make a font family, be more specific, but...
Hey there, we have a message on chat right now by, what's the name? Check, of course, that's not your real name, probably. How's it going? Yeah, it's going well. What about you? How's your day been? I'm doing good. I'm actually on the second day learning about, well, I already know HTML and CSS, but a refresher is always good, I say.
I think this is a little bit better.
How are you doing?
One issue here with some elements is when you click on them and they become focused, is they get sort of, this is what we call an out.
What's that badge that you have? Oh, are you an Elden Ring fan? You watched the when the DLC was released. This is very. What happened to my headphone cable just got stuck there. CSS is very dense. It is very related. Okay. It's also evolving kind of fast. Yeah, but then you have to get started somewhere, right? My aim here is to after I learn HTML and CSS, I don't know JavaScript, but still a refresher isn't bad. But the main thing is to get into React and stuff. In fact, what I do mainly is machine learning, stuff is what I want to get into, but I figured if I want to make projects and make them presentable, web development is a very good skill to have on this side, isn't it?
Outline, and this is here for accessibility purposes because some people they don't have good eyesight, so this outline helps them navigate around the website. So typically you know, you don't want to remove it because it has a certain purpose, but it doesn't look very good. So you want to have, you know, in terms of styling, if you're going to remove it, which is what we will do in the real world, you do want to have a good replacement for this. Okay. So we will talk more about this, but for now we're going to say outline.
Replace what?
You don't want to remove it because this outline helps them navigate here for accessibility purposes. Because some people they don't have good eyesight, so this outline.
You're a PyTorch or a TensorFlow user, maybe both. Right now, the course that I'm doing is on PyTorch. If you check out my YouTube channel, you will see all the streams that I do are just put on there. But yeah, I'll definitely get into TensorFlow too after I finish PyTorch and stuff. What about you? What are you a ML developer? I mean, are you a developer? Of course, you're a developer. I mean, else you wouldn't be watching the stream right now. But are you like an ML developer or like a web dev? One of my goal is to train. What's that? The text is very small. I need to enlarge it. To play. You're more on the web dev side, okay? That's cool. But to play Toho. I'm new to that. I don't know what that is. Is that some kind of game, like a board game, or like a like a you know a online game or something like that?
Outline helps them navigate around the website.
What tech stack do you use?
Typically, you know, you don't want to remove it because it has a certain purpose, but it doesn't look very good. So you want to have, you know, in terms of styling, if you're going to remove it, which is what we will do in the real world, you do want to have a good replacement for this. Okay. So we will talk more about this, but for now we're going to say outline. You have to be careful with this. Outline none, and that will remove that outline, right? Now you have to have some kind of replacement in the real world, right? So we're going to add.
It looks better without the board. I don't know why we need a replacement for that. There was a famous game like a crazy shooter where you have to dodge. I've look at me. I can't pronounce. We had to dodge tons of bullets. Huh. I didn't know that. So is this like looking from the assuming this is gameplay and stuff, it looks like Genshin Impact. Is it like one of those anime games? RPG adventure. Huh. This looks good. What's that? Not the RPG kind. The shoot 'em all kind. So I'm looking at the wrong game, and I shoot 'em all kind. Toho shooter. Oh, okay. Are you saying this game has a shooter thing alongside the RPG going on? Tell me more about the wait, what was your you want to train ML to play to? Oh, okay. Where are you? And like, have you done some research into that on how you'll do that, or?
Add a comment
Right now with that.
And we're going to say find replacement. Right, so this is still an introductory project, so we're not going to get too crazy. But one of the things that we will do, by the way, is when you focus this input, is it becomes brighter. Right, so that's already one indicator that this element is focused. Now you can add other things to make it more, you know, to help that person really understand that this is focused. But it will take some time before we really get to that. Right, so in project 2 we'll see a different way. Right, so just it's good to be aware of this already because a lot of developers aren't even aware of it. They just remove it and they don't even think about replacement. Okay, so now when you make it focused, it's not here. Now what we will do is when the input becomes focused, so now we can say dot input focus. Right, so we're selecting the input in the focus.
We set the opacity to 100, right? One, and we need to get a transition, right? A transition opacity. We'll Google it. Transition CSS. Transition. Okay, yeah, let's write opacity. Although it did not glow up like as on a VS Code. Okay, something's wrong. I need to check that. What's that? Da, da, da. I started a little bit of on the course about ML using PyTorch, but didn't go that deep into it. I learned about tensors. Is it the course by Daniel Bork? I have the link down below if you wanna. That's a course that I'm following anyway. But there's tons of things to learn in that domain. I'm very noob. I mean, everyone's yeah, got to begin, right? Few months ago, I would say I wasn't paying that much into ML myself. I'm no expert or anything by any means. I'm also just getting started. But yeah, you'll get there with enough dedication. If you have dedication, you can pull off anything.
State, we're not going to have the outline anymore. However, what we will do is we're going to make the opacity 1. Right, so the
Yeah, that's what I did. But why isn't the maybe the transition works and oh maybe okay the difference is two. It looks exactly the same. Also, after a long break, I need to go back to being a web developer, which is PHP, since that's what companies seek for where I live. Yeah, I'm not much of a PHP dev myself. Everything that I do revolves around Python. I am going to assume that Symfony is a modular package in PHP. I can understand PHP enough to just walk around WordPress sites.
opacity right now is 0.8 for this input. I'm going to make it 1 in the focus state. Now you can.
Okay, but okay. Oh, okay. Of course, it's gonna overwrite it, isn't it? Yeah, there we go. If I have the transition, that looks good. But let's set that to 0.8. Yep, that looks good enough. What's that? Symfony is a big PHP framework to make your backend. Yeah, basically like how you have Django and Flask in Python, right? The only by the way, it's not a website or anything I created, but the only time that I've come across a PHP module was so not PHP framework was the one with the fire symbol. I don't know the name of it though. One second. PHP web dev framework. Um, was it this? I think it was this one, Code Igniter. I also heard of Laravel. Symfony is a first for me though. I haven't heard of it. Was it Symfony? PHP Symfony. Is this one of those new modules or just an existing like a classic? Oh, look at that. Our viewer count is also increasing now. Oh, by exactly you mean it is like Django and Flask in Python.
You can see it becomes brighter, right? So this is you could say this
Symphony
is
is old and very performant now. Oh, so it's one of those, huh? It's Laravel concurrent, let's say. Okay.
a replacement for outline. You could argue that this is not enough.
Do you do anything else other than web development? For personal projects' sake, other than the ML thing that you mentioned.
That it's not clear enough. You can make an argument. But I think this is also I think it's already a decent start for a replacement. Maybe some other subtle thing could replace it. In addition to this, could be in total could be a very good replacement. In any way, this is already pretty good. Now it's not smooth right now, right? So you can see it's instant, right? So as soon as you click on here, it becomes.
But I did 2 seconds. Oh, that's because he didn't do the.
Right. So if you want to make things like this smooth, you
part.
can use transition again. Right? And you have to use transition in the normal rule set, so not in the focus, but in the normal one. And here, typically people use all, right? So for any property that gets changed, well, it's only opacity in this case, but it should happen in 0.4 seconds.
Okay, let's
right, so now
do
you can
this.
see it's very smooth. I think that looks really cool.
Yeah, that looks.
Okay, now if you look at the example, the placeholder text is a little bit darker.
That looks good enough.
Right here, the placeholder text is a little bit too gray or too.
What's that? PHP is backend oriented and it already is vast enough to not. Yeah. I've seen. I mean, I can't speak on this. But over the internet, I've seen people throw around a lot of hate for PHP. Always. Why is that? I haven't used PHP, but I don't know. People hate it, but I think it's most of the web pages out there use PHP in one way or the other because of WordPress, right? I think that's I heard that from somewhere. I think that's true though.
The opacity or something is too low. So we can actually also select that placeholder text, right? So in the HTML, in the input here, we have the placeholder attribute, right? So here we have placeholder blah, blah, blah.
Wait, placeholder blah, blah, blah. Show me the placeholder first.
Placeholder text is a little bit too gray or too, the opacity or something is too low. So we can actually also select that placeholder text, right? So in the HTML, in the input here, we have the placeholder attribute, right? So here we have placeholder blah, blah, blah. We can actually style that. So we can actually select that. So we can say dot input. And now it's with two colons. So we say input colon placeholder. And here we can simply say color. Well, it should be black. So we have a hex code for that, right? Just 3 O's. And now it's a little bit darker, right?
So there's a bad reputation. Oh wait, PHP is very old and there are tons of badly written code that people have to update and they hate it. Oh, it's because they have to maintain it that they hate it. So the PS, I was about to say PS, that cons. Anyway, also PHP used to not be very performant back in the days. So it has a bad reputation. But nowadays it has become a good option. Huh. That's good to know.
This is already pretty advanced.
It gets most of its hate because of maintainers, I would say then.
Alright, so last thing we have to do here is the button.
We're changing this placeholder to be a bit darker. Let's do that. Change the color to black and there we go. That looks better. What's that? In a few words, PHP was bad, written by bad devs, but it has evolved for the best. That's the best summary you can give it. A lot of JS frameworks follow the PHP way of doing backends. I guess so because PHP was the I don't know if I'm completely correct, but before JS and all, PHP was the main player out there, right? So JS would have taken inspiration, I believe. Yeah, it is the foundation of it is the PHP is to backend as to what C is to programming languages.
Right, so the button has some default styling. It actually has a background color. It has a border as well. And yeah, so let's actually start styling this. So let's actually start off by removing that default styling. So we don't want to have that border, and also it adds some padding. We don't want to have any padding.
So what are we gonna do? We're gonna style the button now. Set the padding to 0 and we're gonna enlarge it, scale it, I guess. Considering that 77 of websites. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that fact was right. Sure thing. And we've reached our follower goal there. Thank you, Checkham, for that. Sure thing. See ya. Take care. Let's go. Alright, take care. See ya. Again, thank you for that follow.
Right, we can use 0 pixels. I'll actually just use 0 from now on. We want the background color to be black. Right, so you can write 6 zeros, but if the last 3 are the same as the first 3, you only have to write the first 3. It should have a height. Let's actually save this to see what we get. Okay, that doesn't look very good. So we'll give it a height of 64 pixels, a width of 133 pixels. Now it's the same height as the input, or well, let's see what's slightly different. We'll get to that, but it should actually be the same, or at least it should look the same. The text color should be white, right? So we have F, 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 6 F, but the last 3 are the same as the first 3, so we can simply write FFF, search. And here we have that font issue again, so the font is not automatically inherited.
Let's see what the button looks like now. The font should be different. It looks plain, I would say.
And so this is not a layout font, so we have to force it to inherit the font properties like font family, but also font size. So we want to have a border radius so that the border
if we
is
do
also
font inheritance, it inherits the little everything, huh?
right? So they're a little bit
That it's curved the border radius now.
curved. And there should be some more space between the button and the input. So we can give the button some margin on the left. Right? Margin is really used for space between elements, right? We also want the text of this button to be in all uppercase. So every character should be uppercase. So we can say text transform uppercase. All right, now one design trick is when you have uppercase.
Let's see, okay.
Usually it looks better if there is more space between the letters. We can have letter spacing of 1 pixel, and it's going to add a little bit more space between the characters of the text. Usually it looks better if you have all uppercase text. The font size should be a little bit smaller, right? So when you have uppercase text, usually you want to reduce the font size as well because the uppercase takes up quite a bit of space. We want to make it a little bit bolder, font weight.
It's like I would say HTML and CSS are like Legos. Like you get a design and then you just like how you build things with Legos. You use HTML to build out things and then you use CSS to first style it.
500. And
that's one way. That's one way to think about it, I would say.
Now, if we look at the button here with the input, yeah, so we are pretty much finished with the button here. Now, one last thing we have to do is when we hover the button, we also want to have a subtle hover effect. We can say button hover. When we hover the button, we want to have the cursor change to like a hand type of illustration, and that's called pointer. Right, so now when you hover it, you get this. Also the background color. So the background color should become this color, which is a little bit more gray than pure black. Okay, that looks better. Now this happens instantly, so let's also use a transition here. Transition. So we could say background color, right? Then we can say all, and the cursor.
How did he come? Oh, he just adjusted it. Please just copy the X code. See? Yeah, that becomes a more of a grayish black. That's what I'll call it, grayish black.
So the background color should become this color, which is a little bit more gray than pure black. Okay, That looks better. Now this happens instantly, so let's also use a transition here, transition. So we could say background color, right? But we can say all, and the cursor will still change instantly, by the way, because the cursor cannot animate, right? It's just, it has to, how do you animate between that? Right, so the background color will be smooth now. Right, it's just, it has to, how do, right? But we can say all, and the cursor will still change instantly, by the way, transition here, transition. So we could say background color, right? But we can say all, and the cursor will still change instantly, by the way, because the cursor cannot animate, right? It's just, it has to, how do you animate between that? Right, so the background color will be smooth now. All right, I think that looks really cool. Right, now we are finished with the main section. And actually, before we are finished with that, we also want to have an intro.
That's I think we are already there, right? It looks, yeah, I think we're reaching the end. Only a bit of subtle effects are left, I believe.
Animation
See.
for the main part, right? So now we have it for the header. But if we look at the example, when we load the page, the main section should also have the same animation actually, but it should come right after the header. Right, so if we go to main here, if we scroll upwards, main, here we can say animation again. It's going to ask us, well, which steps? Well, we already have created those steps, right? It's the same, fade in. And it should happen in 0.5 seconds, right? So if we do this, now it has pretty cool animation as well, but it's exactly at the same time as the header. I think it looks a little bit better if it starts off with the header and then right after comes the main section. So we basically want to have a delay for the main part. So what we can do is we can actually add another value here. And if we add another value, the browser will know, okay, so this is for the delay. So there's going to be a 0.1 second delay, very short. And if we do that, well, it's going to be a little bit strange because if you look closely, during that delay, it will actually still be visible. And then after 0.1 seconds, it will actually kick in the animation will actually kick in. So what we actually want is that during the delay, we don't want to see this, right? So during the delay, it should already take up this first step basically with opacity of 0. Right, so what we can do here is, this is pretty advanced, by the way, you don't have to understand this right now, we'll practice with this more, but we can add another value called backwards, and it will basically take up that first step already during the delay with an opacity of 0.
Take what?
Step basically with opacity of 0. Right, so what we can do here is, this is pretty advanced, by the way, you don't have to understand this right now, we'll practice with this more, but we can add another value called backwards, and it will basically take up that first step already during the delay with an opacity of 0, for example.
Or it will already have that property during the delay is, I think, what it's trying to say. Yeah, that looks better, yeah.
We don't get that jarring effect. Now, yeah, this is very smooth, and I think this looks really cool. All right, so we are finished with the main part. All right, let's finish the project by creating the footer. If you look at the example, the footer has a copyright statement and, some statistics, and it has that border on top. So let's go to our HTML, and here we already created footer. So now we're going to have a copyright statement. Let's actually use a paragraph tag for that, and let's give it a class of copyright. So in here, we want to use that copyright symbol, right? Now, it's a bit difficult to create that on our keyboard, and we could find it somewhere on Google, and we could copy that, and paste it right here. But HTML actually helps us out here, right? So for some symbols, there is a so-called HTML entity. So what we can write is ampersand, copy, and then always a semicolon, right, at the end of a HTML entity. And this will actually create that copyright symbol. Right? So the browser will see this and sees, oh, you want to create a copyright symbol. Right, so we can have any number here. I'll use 2025, copyright by Evento. Right, that could be our copyright statement, and then we have some statistics, right? So we can say P, class, we can just call it stats. 18,430 events, 320 cities. All right, so if you have all of that, right now it's going to look like this, but not so good. So let's go to our CSS at the bottom. Let's add a comment here for footer. So we have footer, we have copyright. And we have stats. Okay, so we want the copyright and the stats to sit on the same line, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So we've already seen this trick before. We can use flexbox. We can make the footer a so-called flex container, basically just make the display property flex. And then its child elements, what we call the flex items, will sit next to each other on the same line. That's the default behavior. So if we go to footer here and we simply say display flex, what you'll see is now they sit on the same line, the copyright statement and the stats. Okay? Now we also want this to be centered horizontally, like all the other ones, right? Or at least, I mean, like the header here, right? So we want it to be the same width as the header, and then also horizontally centered on the page. So what we can do is we can simply give it a width of 1150 pixels. And,
What did I do?
well,
yeah.
what we want, of course, is that there is a space between the copyright statement and the stats, right? So here we want the space between the logo and the list of links. Here we want space between the copyright statement and the stats. So we can use Flexbox for that, actually. We have the justify content property. And again, we'll talk more about Flexbox, but this is like one of the most important concepts in CSS, so I already want to make you familiar with it. It's very powerful, and yeah, we'll talk more about it. Right, so justify content here is for the horizontal axis. We can regulate how the flex items should behave in the horizontal axis, so we can say space between. And when you do that, you can see it's already sitting here, right? But now
Yeah, but where's the 18,000? Oh, it's all the way here. Yeah, we can add the same amount of margin towards the left so that it aligns itself with the window and all the links in the top right corner. Link items as the name of the class that we've put it, and yeah, that should work, right? And let's go and put this over here, and did it work? Yeah, that worked. I mean, I don't think there's a look that Wesley, right? Yeah, Wesley's trying to go for.
they should be centered horizontally as well, right? So here we're going to say, we're going to use the margin auto trick again. We're going to say margin left auto and margin right auto.
Oh, this is what you aim for?
Right, so then
I mean,
the footer right now is centered, right?
I
A little bit
guess
complicated
if
here
you
with
just
Flexbox and margin auto, but you'll get used to it. You'll get used to it as we practice more and more. So now we also want to get the footer at the bottom of the page,
yeah.
right? And this is another layout problem, and most of these layout problems are solved by Flexbox. So let's see how we can use Flexbox here. And again, we'll talk much more about this. But if we look at the HTML structure, we can see the footer is a child element of the body element. So what we
Child element of the body element, right? That's right. I can vouch for that.
could do is we can say that the body, right? We can make the body a flex container. And there's a benefit to this because we unlock the Flexbox functionalities basically. So when you do display flex, we now have access to those Flexbox functionalities. Now, again, the default behavior of Flexbox is that all the child elements, the flex items, they're going to sit next to each other horizontally on the same row. We don't want that here. And we still want that vertical direction, right? So the body right now is the parent element of the header, the main, and the footer. And now they're sitting on the same line horizontally. That's the default behavior. But we can also make it a vertical direction. We can say flex direction should be.
So it stacks on top of each other. And what is column reverse to that? Is it like, yeah, that's what it does. Guys, just do column.
Column. The default is actually row, right? Horizontal. But we want column, right? So if we save that, now it's, well, what we had before, right? But now we have unlocked the Flexbox functionalities. So what we can do actually is we can go back to the footer here. And one of the things we can do in Flexbox is use margin with auto. And we've seen this before with margin left and margin right. But here we can also do it on the top. Right, so margin auto actually has some special behavior in Flexbox. So if you do this, well, now we still don't see a change because there's one more thing we have to do, and that is go back to the body, and we have to make sure that the body itself also stretches all the way to the bottom. So this is actually called the viewport, by the way. Right, so we have a screen resolution. You know, that's the entire width here on my screen, and also the entire height here of my screen. But there's also something called the viewport. You're going to see this term sometimes. So the viewport is the visible area of the web page. So this is not the entire width. Right, this is only from here until here. Right, and from here until all the way to the bottom here. It does not include this address bar of the browser. Right, so we want to make sure that the body itself also stretches all the way to the bottom. You may think it already does so because of the background image, but the default behavior with the body is if you set the background, it will actually cover everything, but the body itself does not necessarily stretch all the way to the bottom. So what we can do here is we can set a height, and we want this to be the entire height of the viewport, right, from here all the way to the bottom. So we have another unit in CSS, which is called the VH, viewport height. So we're saying here the body should be 100% of that viewport height.
Of the viewport height.
And when you do that, now you can see the footer is all the way at the bottom, right? Because we set the margin top of this footer to auto, so it's going to add as much margin as possible between the rest of these elements, which means the content is going to be pushed down here. Right? So this is pretty advanced. You don't have to understand this right now. I'm just showing as possible between the rest of these elements, which means the content is going to be pushed down here. Right? So this is pretty advanced. You don't have to understand this right now. I'm just showing you some of the options you have for solving these layout challenges. This is a very common problem, by the way, where you want the footer to stick at the bottom of the page. Okay, we'll practice more with Flexbox. Now, we don't want this to be right at the bottom, right? So we'll solve that in a second. So what we want is that both the copyright and the stats should get a font size of 12 pixels. So we could set the font size to 12 pixels here and the font size to 12 pixels here, or we can use the mechanism of inheritance, and we only have to set it once on their parent element. So we can set the font size to 12 pixels here in footer, right? When you do that, both the copyright statement and the stats are now a little bit smaller, right? Because
right, font size can be 12 pixels, and yeah, that's smaller, right?
Inherit that font size. Now we don't want them to sit at the bottom of the viewport, right? So we want to add some padding on the bottom. We can also use margin by way here. Let's actually make it 15 pixels. And we want to get a border on the top, if you remember that. The border should be 1 pixel thick, should be a solid border, and it should be a white border, but it has lower opacity. So we can use RGBA. We can say white is 255 for each color here, red, green, and blue. The opacity here should be 0.2. Right, so then we have this border. Now this border is sitting pretty close to the text. So if we want space between the content and the border, well, remember the box
Yeah.
model. Is it margin or padding? Well, that's actually padding, right? So margin is outside the border. Padding is between the content and the border. So here we can also have some padding on the top of 10 pixels. Okay, now we also want to set the color of the footer here. Right now, they are too bright. So we want to make them a little bit de-emphasized. And one way to do that is with a lower opacity, right? So we can set the color to a white color, but with a lower opacity. That's going to be 255 again, right? And then a 0.5 opacity. This will make them a little bit more de-emphasized. All right, so if you have that, we are pretty much finished.
Okay.
Last thing we have to do, when we load the page here, we now have pretty cool animation here, right? And actually we have this scroll bar here as well, right? We probably want to get rid of that. So we have a couple of options for that. But you know, you want to be careful with removing scroll bars. But here we actually want this to be the complete viewport, so we don't want to have any scroll bar. So what you can do is you can go up here, and you can go to body. And what we can say here is we can say if there's anything that overflows vertically, that will actually trigger the scroll bar. But here we're going to say if something overflows, so overflow Y, we can simply hide that, right? So that will not give us a scroll bar, but it will simply hide whatever overflows vertically, right? So now the scroll bar is gone, and yeah.
Wait, what did you do? You said
If something overflows, so overflow Y, we can simply hide that, right? So that will not give us.
And you put that inside body. So let's do that. Let's do that.
Scroll bar, but
yeah,
it will simply hide whatever overflows vertically, right? So now the scroll bar is gone, and yeah, really the last thing we have to do here is we have to, oh, now something else is wrong, because now for some reason this is sitting too high. So I already know what the reason is, and that is simply because there's also some default styling.
it is not sitting too high for me.
For the body element. The body actually has some margin as a default, and now with overflow Y hidden, that's actually a problem. So let's actually remove that default styling because it's messing up our layout here. So we're going to set the margin to 0. You don't have to completely understand why that happens. So now when we do this, you can see it looks a little bit better again. So what we want now is, right, so now if we compare, it looks the same as here as in the example. So now what we want, and actually let's double check that, I'm going to make it full screen. So now it's sitting the header is sitting too high for some reason. So let me actually see what's going on here. So did we give the header a padding? No. Okay, so the header is sitting too close to the viewport here.
Maybe
let's actually give the header some padding on the top of 10 pixels. And now, yeah, now it looks proper. Okay, so really the last thing we have to do here is give the footer an animation as well.
Oh, no,
so we can go to the footer.
Right, the heading is a bit high.
It's sitting too close to the viewport here. But let's actually give the header some padding on the top of 10 pixels.
Alright, let's do that for the header. Padding top can be 10 pixels.
And now, yeah, now it looks proper. Okay, so really the last thing we have to do here is give the footer an animation as well. So we can go to the footer. Right, it has the same steps as the other one. So we can say animation, fade in. And this should also happen in like 0.5 seconds. So we can say 0.5 seconds. Now it should also have a delay. It should come after the main. So it's going to have a slightly longer delay. And during the delay, it should already take up that first step with opacity 0 and so on. So we can add another value here called backwards, which will be responsible for that. But this is already pretty advanced. Seconds. We have to do here is the footer animation as well. We can go to the footer.
On the footer.
It has the same steps as the other one. So we can say animation, fade in. And this.
Alright, let's do that.
should also happen in like 0.5 seconds. So we can say 0.5 seconds. Now it should also have a delay. It should come after the main. So it's going to have a slightly longer delay. And during the delay, it should already take up that first step with opacity 0 and so on. So we can add another value here called backwards, which will be responsible for that. But this is already pretty advanced. So don't worry if you don't understand that. So let's save that here. And now we are finished, because if you now load the page, you can see we have our final version, which I think looks very cool. Right? So some of these things were already pretty advanced. Right? So don't worry if you were confused by something. This is already looking pretty cool. And yeah, congratulations for making it this far. Don't give up now, because the next project is going to be even better. And we already learned quite a bit. These were just the fundamentals. These were just the basics. In the next section, we're going to take it to the next level, to an intermediate level. So don't give up now. I'll see you there. Now, one problem with this project, by the way, before we go to the next section, is right now it only looks good on wider, well, devices. Right? So if you are on a smaller device, like a tablet or mobile phone, it's going to look like this. Right, so it's going to look broken like this.
Yeah,
this
it's
is also
not
called
gonna
responsiveness. So right now our project is not responsive. It's not working properly across
doing
multiple
this.
sorts of devices. Right. So this is more of an intermediate topic, and we'll talk more about that. By the way, if you learned valuable things until now, make sure to leave a like, or maybe even subscribe or comment below the video to let me know what you think. I would really appreciate it as well. And then I will actually see you in the next section. This is more of an intermediate topic, and we'll talk more about that. By the way, if you learned valuable things until now, make sure to leave a like, or maybe even subscribe or comment below the video to let me know what you think. I would really appreciate it as well. And then I will actually see you in the next section. All right, let's take our HTML and CSS to the next level. In this section, we're going to look at intermediate HTML and CSS. So for HTML, we're going to look at semantic tags. We've actually already used some of them, header, main, and footer. We're using these instead of div. We'll talk more about that in a second. We're also going to look at intermediate CSS. So for example, the terminology, right? So I've already mentioned a little bit like property and declaration. We'll review that. We're going to look at shorthands, because we've been using margin left, margin right. You can also use margin top, margin bottom, but it's a lot of typing. And so there are shorthands in CSS. So for example, margin, you can set the top, left, right, bottom in one line. Same goes for background and typing. We'll review that. We're also going to look at intermediate CSS. So for example, the terminology, right? So I've already mentioned a little bit like property and declaration. We'll review that. We're going to look at shorthands, because we've been using margin left, margin right. You can also use margin top, margin bottom, but it's a lot of typing. And so there are shorthands in CSS. So for example, margin, you can set the top, left, right, bottom in one line. Same goes for background and animation. We'll talk about that. We're also going to do a so-called CSS reset, because the browsers, they have some default styling, right? And usually we don't want that. So we want to reset it, start from a clean slate. CSS overall is not super difficult, but the tricky part is really layouts. And in CSS, the best way to solve most layout problems is with Flexbox. We're going to look at positioning. So we have position absolute and position relative. We're going to look at some more advanced techniques for centering elements, right? So we've seen text align, and we've also seen margin auto. But there are two other ones that I want to show you. And don't worry, we'll keep practicing with everything that we've already discussed, right? So all the basics, all the fundamentals, they will still come in play, right? We will do another project in the next section, and they are still used, right? So this is just, some additional concepts. So there are also some advanced selectors in CSS. We'll talk about that. But these days, this is a recent addition. We have so-called custom properties. Right? People also call this variables in CSS. We have before and after pseudo elements. And sometimes elements, they overlap, right? So the browser has to decide which element comes on top, and there's a certain order for that. And lastly, we'll look at responsiveness. This is very important because people are using a wide variety of devices these days. The problem with our previous project is that it's not responsive, right? So it only looks good on wider devices like desktops or laptops, right? But that's not sufficient in the real world. In the real world, we need to make sure that our project looks good, on mobile, on tablet, and so on. And we're using media queries for that in CSS. All right, that's what we're going to discuss. All right, so we're going to start off with semantic HTML, and I have actually opened the code from the project that we just did in the previous section, Evento, because here we actually already used some semantic tags. So for example, we used a header tag. In practice, a lot of people would not use header, but they would use div. Right, so they would make this a div element. And this is not necessarily wrong. A lot of people would not use, because here we actually already used some semantic tags. So for example, we used a header tag. In practice, a lot of people would not use header, but they would use div. Right, so they would make this a div element.
Okay.
And this is not necessarily wrong, and you will actually come across this quite often, especially when people use React, for example. They tend to use divs a lot. It's actually like a known joke that everything is a div. And it's just suboptimal, right? So we have a specific tag. Like if you have a header, we have a specific tag for that. Semantic tag, it conveys meaning. And the advantage of using a semantic tag, because a div represents no additional information. It's just a generic tag, right? Header is more specific. Right? It conveys information about what's in there. And the advantages of using these semantic tags is, well, first of all, it becomes easier to read your HTML, right? Because oh, it's a header, right? Because you see the header tag. And oh, it's a main here. This is the most important information, right? So main is also a semantic tag. In practice, people would be using a div quite often, actually, right? So you could do this if you want to use a div. We have not used a div yet, but this is what people use divs for. Right, but the main, if you use the main tag, it conveys
so
meaning,
basically
right?
Semantic tags suggest you describe what the tag is in the actual tag part of it, rather than describing it in the class part of it.
So this is the most important information on the page, right? So if you go through your HTML, it's better structured that way, so it becomes easier to read. And also, an additional advantage of using semantic tags is it's better for search engines, right? So when Google comes to your website, Google is going to go through your HTML. It's trying to find out what it's all about, and these semantic tags can help Google figure out what's going on. We've also used footer here, right? You can also use a div here if you want.
Oh, it's
right? This
good
is a
for
generic,
SEO
container tag, but this is a footer, so we actually have a footer tag, so it's probably better to use that one. Another advantage of doing this, by the way, some people they use special software like screen readers, because these people may have a disability, and these screen readers, it's easier for the screen readers, for the software to understand what your HTML is about if it's using semantic tags. Right, so these are actually already the most common ones, so header, main, and footer. There are two more actually that I want to show you. And actually, you can also see the H1 here is also a semantic tag, right? Because we could also use maybe span, right? Or div again, right? Or maybe even paragraph, right? You could make alt text paragraph, or you could be more specific, like for a heading, if we actually have heading tags, in this case H1, the most important heading on the page, right? And then we could have other headings, H2, H3. Those could be less important, right? So that already conveys extra meaning. Okay, but there are two other ones that I think are quite important. So here on top we have that list of links, right? This is an important block of navigation on the page, and this is actually very common on websites. In the header you have some collection of links. Now what people use in practice is the nav tag around this as well, right? So you would put all of this. It's not going to look pretty, but semantically it is optimal. So you would have this list in an additional element, the nav element. The nav element is for like important blocks of navigation on your page.
Navigation.
In the footer, sometimes we also have navigation, for example, for the privacy policy or terms and conditions. We don't generally consider that to be an important block of navigation, right? It's just, you know, on the...
Let's put that in navigation. So
It's just, you know, privacy policy. The nav element, semantically it is
that in navigation. That should work.
optimal. So you would have this list in an additional element, the nav element. The nav element is for like important blocks of navigation on your page. In a footer, sometimes we also have navigation, for example, for the privacy policy or terms and conditions. We don't generally consider that to be an important block of navigation, right? It's just, you know, it's just, you know, it's there because it needs to be there, but it's not really, you know, it's not really important. So we typically don't wrap that in a nav, but in a header, typically it is important, right? Login links or sign up links, that's important. We want people to be easily, access that, right? And use it. But typically that is wrapped in another element, in a nav element, right? So that's what we'll use in the next project as well. Okay, so another important one is actually the section tag. So here in the main element, for example, you know, we don't have that much content. We only have this. But imagine that you have additional, you know, sections, right? So here we could wrap this in a section tag. Right, so here this would be the first section in the main, and then we could have another section, for example, for
you know what, I'll be right back. All right, at my stream is me because I am back. All right, let's continue with the tutorial.
Right, this website was about events. Maybe we want to get like an overview of the most popular events, right? We could do that in another section here, and then maybe we can have another section for the previous events or the most popular artists, right? Or trending events or the fastest rising events, right? They can be different sections, right? And typically people use either div, yeah, you could use div again, but more specifically, this is a section. Right, so that is semantic HTML, and that's what we're going to use in the next project as well.
All right, for the sake of it, let's put this inside the section semantic tag too.
All right, let's talk about intermediate CSS. So I have opened my code editor. I have opened a folder. I've actually created a new folder, and I've opened that up here. And let's actually quickly set up a very simple.
All right, let's do the same.
Setup project. I'm going to create an HTML file and also a CSS file. I'm going to call it styles.css. These are typical names. So here I'm going to use the shortcut that Emmet gives us. So you can write HTML, and then we want the second option. I like to add some space here. I'm going to change the title to intermediate HTML.
So we're gonna give it the usual name or names plural because we are also gonna create a CSS file. Meaning that styles.css. Let VS Code do its magic.
HTML and CSS.
Oops. Okay, why didn't that snap in place? Okay,
Okay.
that should work.
Now, typical mistake here is that you forget to link to your external resources. Right? On the second option, I like to add some space here. I'm going to change the title to intermediate HTML and CSS. Okay. Now, typical mistake here is that you forget to link to your external resources. Right? So CSS is actually an external resource, right? And you need to make it explicit because we're going to give this HTML file to the browser, and the browser is going to go line by line. And if there's no link to the CSS, the browser won't know about this CSS file. So you can write link, press tab, and Emmet will give us the complete element. It's going to ask us where this file is, what's in the same folder. So you only have to write the file name. Okay, so then in here we can write CSS and we can be rest assured that it will be applied to the HTML. Okay, so let's talk about the terminology of these styles, right? Because you're going to see this sometimes. So we have a selector, right? So for example, I have a paragraph element with the class of text. Hello world, right? So I want to style this paragraph. We can select by tag, right? But I'm selecting all paragraph elements on the page now, right? So if I have other paragraphs that need to be styled differently, that's going to be a problem because I only want this paragraph. I want to style this particular paragraph right now in a certain way, right? So we can be more specific. We can give this a class of text. This is what people most commonly do in practice, right? So we use text. Then we have these opening and closing curly braces. We could also select by ID, by the way. This was more common in the past, and yeah, people have moved away from this for several.
In the past, I didn't know that. I thought IDs were still used to this day. When I see them used quite a lot, to be frank. So I don't know if I agree with that.
Reasons. So typically people use classes. Okay, so then in here we have so-called declarations. Right, so a declaration consists of a property, here it's color, and a value for the property. Right, so here we can use a built-in color, and then we have a semicolon. Right, we can have another declaration, right, for example, the font size property with a value of 50 pixels. Right, so this
declaration with a value. This is a property, this is the value, and this entire thing is a declaration.
Entire thing is called a rule set or a rule. Right, this is the selector. Right, this is the declaration block. This is a declaration. This is also a declaration.
There is a declaration. This entire thing is the rule set. This is the selector and
right. This is the declaration block. This is a declaration. This is also a declaration.
This is the declaration block, and this entire thing, declaration block plus the selector makes up the rule set.
This is a property. This is a property. This is a value. This is also a value. Right? That's how CSS is structured. Okay, let's talk about the CSS reset. So right now we only have one paragraph on the page, right? And I'm going to try opening this up in the browser so I can click and drag this here to the top part of my browser. And
so intermediate. How did I? It's with the hyphens that I named the folder.
And this is what we have right now.
It's create a paragraph tag then. The text wasn't applied for some reason. So I mean the properties and applied for some reason. Gotta use the correct verbiage, guys. So alright. Color text. What could have gone wrong here? Oh, I have not saved this, have I? That was the reason.
Now, if you remember, this is going to have some default styling. And actually, let me zoom in a little bit so you can see what's going on. So most of these elements are going to have some default styling in the browser, and we can actually inspect that. So if you right-click and click on Inspect, you're going to open up the browser developer tools. So let me actually zoom in here as well. Right, so one of the things you can see here in the Elements tab is an overview of the HTML. Right, so here you can see body, and in the body right now we only have one paragraph element. Now here below we can see information about the CSS. We can also click on Compute It, and we can actually see the box model. Right, so we can see the actual content. This is just determined by the font itself. There's no padding, there's no border, but there is some margin. Right, so the browser has already applied, for some reason, some margin to the paragraph element because we have not added this margin ourselves. Right. Now, this is just a paragraph, but if you use other elements like an H1, right, or there are most of these elements are going to have like image, like most of these elements are going to have some type of default styling. Right. In many cases, we don't want that. Like we want to have our own styles. We want to start from a clean slate. So we want to reset that, right? So typically what you can do,
right?
So what we could do is we could say for this paragraph, we could say margin top 0, right? Margin bottom 0. Now we have removed the margin, right? But imagine that we had to do that for every element on the page that has default styling. It would be too much work, right? So that's not how people do it. So what people do is there's another selector, the asterisk selector, and with this one you're selecting all elements, right? And then we can say for all elements, remove the margin on the top right? Margin on the bottom, margin left, margin right. However, we also have a shorthand, so we might as well just let me give an example of that right now. If you just say margin, right, so not margin left or margin right, but just margin, and then one value, that means all sides, right? So now I'm setting all sides to 0 pixel margin, right? And now that default margin will be gone for the paragraph element, right? So if I save here and refresh, you can see this paragraph element right now, you can see it moved upwards, the margin is gone,
Right.
right? Now, typically another thing that you want to remove is any padding. So typically this is also included, right? Padding is the same story, by the way, right? So we could say padding left, 0 pixels, padding right, 0 pixels, or you can just say padding with one value is for all sides. This is also a shorthand. So one other thing that is a bit advanced, and you don't have to understand this right now, is the box sizing property. This is the most difficult property in CSS, in my opinion.
All right. So I think this is gonna be the calculus of CSS, because calculus is like, I think calculus is considered to be the hardest in math, isn't it? Some people disagree and say it's a trick, but yeah. Anyways.
People typically set this to border box. And yeah, I can explain to you how this works, but also are you not going to understand this right now?
That's it's like I can explain this, but I'm not going to, because you are okay. That's a bit insulting, I would say, but yeah. I think Wesley roasted me for that one.
Even most experienced developers don't understand this property.
He's honest though.
But it's still very helpful. Now, what it comes down to is we can set a width, right? I could set a width here, right? So the text can be at most 100 pixels wide. However, if I also have padding, right? So if we also include padding, is the padding included in that 100 pixels of width that it should have?
Wait, what?
Right, I could set a width here. Right, so the text can be at most 100 pixels wide.
Okay.
However, if I also have padding, right? So if we also include padding, is the padding included in that 100 pixels of width?
Is that? Oh, I see. It should not be, right? Because you're setting padding exclusively.
That it should have, or is the padding not included? Right, so basically we have this box model, right? So if you set the width to 100 pixels, like in terms of the box model, what should be 100 pixels? Should it be this rectangular shape, or should it be including the padding, so this shape, right? So with border box, if you set the width to 100 pixels, it's going to be, well, the border, including the border, the padding, and this. And so this entire, like what I've selected now, and everything inside of there, that can be at most 100 pixels. This is very advanced, and yeah, it's
Oh, then that thing is going to be 100 pixels, huh? Not just the text.
it's very helpful to set it to border box. So that's what we're going to do. You're going to see this in practice. It's just a very advanced property that will take some more.
It's just one of those things where you don't question why, you just follow. Just do as it is.
Time to really understand, and it's not really important right now. I think there are more important concepts that we can discuss, but we'll start using this in the next project as well, just so you can get used to it. And yeah, this is a very typical CSS reset. All right, so let's talk about Flexbox. So as you'll see throughout your developer journey, is CSS you'll pick certain things up as you go along, right? So we could discuss a lot of things, but over time you'll pick up most of it. However, one exception, something that requires a little bit more attention is layouts, right? So you want something positioned in a particular position, right, or in relation to other elements. And the most important solution to this that we have in CSS is called Flexbox. You want to use Flexbox in the vast majority of cases. There's also something called CSS Grid, but that's way more advanced, right? So we have to learn Flexbox first. This is really the most important one. And also you want to use Flexbox in like 99% of the situations. So let's talk a little bit about Flexbox. And let me actually quickly give you an example here. So let's say I have a div, right? I'll actually use a div here because
oh yeah, this is Flexbox in advance, and according to Wesley, and I agree with this, Flexbox is considered to be one of the most important things in CSS, so better pay attention to it.
This does not have to convey meaning right now. I just need some generic container. I will give it a class of I don't know, boxes. I'll use an example with boxes. So in here, let's say we have 3 boxes. Right, so 1, 2, and 3. And let me actually close out of here. Okay, so we have one parent element here, right? And in there, I'm just going to leave these empty. We don't need any content in there. We have 3 elements, right? I will keep the reset. That's not important for now, but I'll keep it there. So we have boxes and one box, or the singular form of box. So then we have, I'm going to set a height here just so we can have a quick example. Let's say this is 300 pixels tall and 1000 pixels wide. Let's make it a little bit smaller. 600 pixels wide and a background color of black. Let's see. Yeah, so this is our boxes right now. Let me make it a little bit smaller, 500 width. Okay, and let's make each box 50 pixels in height and width.
Let's follow along too. We'll copy the let's copy the HTML first. Let's do this in order. So the first div is gonna be labeled boxes. We'll have 3 boxes inside boxes. Div.box, not bo, it should be box. And there we go. I'm gonna set
Okay, so we have
some
one
style
parent
into
element
it
here,
now.
right? And in there, I'm just gonna leave these empty. We don't need any content in there. We have 3 elements, right? I will keep the reset. That's not important for now, but I'll keep it there. So we have boxes and one box, or the singular form of box. So then we have, I'm gonna set a height here just so we can have a quick example. Let's say this is 300 pixels tall and 1000 pixels wide. Let's make it a little bit smaller. 600 pixels wide and a background color of black. Let's see. Yeah, so this is our boxes right now. Let me make it a little bit smaller, 500 width. Okay, and let's make each box 50 pixels in height and width. And I'm gonna give each box a background color of.
This is where our boxes are gonna be fit inside, and let's set the attributes for each individual box now.
Yellow.
I thought
Okay,
you
so
would do
it
white.
looks a bit strange because there are actually 3 boxes. They're sitting vertically. This is the
They're sitting on top of each other, and it looks like a rectangle, I guess.
default. This is how
Naming
they're
doesn't
positioned by
matter for
default,
now.
and because they're sitting right next to each other, they look like one object. But if I would give some margin here, for example, on the top, right? So now each box, right? They all have the same class, right? So they all get the same styling here, and now they're all going to get 5 pixels on top of margin. You can see they are actually different.
Let's just set for ourselves. They are different. Oh, okay. That's a box, alright. That's a box.
Right? Okay. So let's talk about flexbox. Let's say I don't want them to be positioned like this. I want to have some particular layout. So maybe I want this box here in this corner where it's already sitting. The second box should maybe sit here in the center. Right? This box should maybe sit all the way here in this corner. Right? That is a layout. Right? So whenever you run into that type of situation, think about flexbox. So what you can do is always about a parent element and child elements. Right? So the parent element becomes the flex container. Right? So we can say boxes here. We can say display flex. When you do that, this becomes the flex container. And by the way, the order of properties here does not matter, right? And also I can add space here. I like to do that to separate the flexbox. It's just a little bit clearer that these, because we're gonna have more properties, or we could have more properties here, so then they're closely connected or related. It looks a little bit better, I think, but there's no functional reason for that. And also the order does not matter, right? I could also put this at the top, right? So this is something that I should have mentioned earlier, maybe you were wondering about that. But as soon as you say display flex,
like
we unlock the flexbox functionality, so this becomes the flex container.
aside each other. And then there was another property, right? Column. I just remember the value for that. Flex direction column. Yeah. I don't want to do that. Let's just keep it as it is.
Items, right? So we have 3 items here. All right, let's just see what we get if we only do this. Like, what is the default behavior? Okay, so the default behavior is that they're going to sit next to each other horizontally, right? This is the default layout that you get as soon as you have, converted this into a flexbox layout. Now, the way flexbox works is we have a property that we can use to align them somewhere horizontally, and we have another property that we can use to align them somewhere or in some way vertically. So here, let's try, let's try the horizontal property in this case, which is justify content. So with this one, we can decide how they should be positioned horizontally. So we could say center, for example. Right? If we do that, now they're sitting horizontally in the center, right?
Yeah.
There are other values you can play around with this. So for example, space between, right? You can do that.
So they'll have equal space between each block. No. I guess yeah, it is equal space, but it's more like the first and the last one went to the edges, the corners, and the rest are just like sitting in the middle. This case it's one. So if there were 2, you just erase this for a second. I mean, actually, I can just put 1, can't I? Yeah, that's what that would look like if there were 4 boxes inside boxes.
If you write S, you see suggestions here, space between. Right, this is actually what we want, right? There's also space around. So space around will make sure there's a little bit of space on the end of sides.
Oh, alright.
And then also space evenly.
Let's look at space around and space evenly now. Space around. Now let's do space evenly. Yeah, equal space for each.
Which is going to give them equal space, right, on all sides. right? So and that's horizontal in this case.
Flex boxes are really powerful. It just made me realize that right now.
Right, let's actually make this
I just
center.
realized that right now. Is what I
Because this is very common, right? You want to center something. That's a very common layout thing you want to do, right? Now let's talk about horizontal or vertical, right? So we have another property called align items, right? So these are the two typical properties that you use in Flexbox. So with align items, it's the same story, right? So we can also say center, right? And now they're also centered vertically, right? We can also say maybe we don't want to send them vertically. Maybe we want them to be at the end, right? So there's actually also
does it end? Okay.
a value called end, and this is
Basically, using Flexbox, we can move these boxes inside the black box. Or the analogy which he's trying to give is we can just move around elements here and there. Not elements, tags, right? Oh, I guess you can call them elements.
at the end vertically, right? Or maybe we just want them to sit at the start again, right? This is actually the default, right? Or that's how they were already positioned, right? And yeah, these are two very typical things you want to do, right? Especially center here as well, right? So if you want to center something both horizontally and vertically, well, you may want to use Flexbox for that.
It'll
Just use
be
justify
put
content center and align
back
items
down
center. Very
into
common.
middle.
Okay. Now these flex items, you may want to use Flexbox for that. Just use justify content center and align items center. Very common. Okay. Now these flex items are still, they come one after another horizontally, right? Let me actually change this. Right, so this is the default layout. They sit horizontally on the same row. Sometimes we don't want that. We want them to sit vertically, right? Or their flow should be vertical. Right, so we can also change their direction to, right, so default is row. This is what they are right now. We can also set it to column.
Yeah.
And then they are like this.
We
and the tricky part in
experimented
Flexbox is that when you do
already,
this, those properties that we just used, justify content and align items, they switch. So now if we want to center this horizontally, previously we used justify content
Now we use align
to
items.
do that. However, now with flex direction column, it switched. So now it's not.
You know what? Let's check that out. See. Okay, so earlier we used align items to align it like downwards when this was a row. It's like the inverse, isn't it? Jump from here to here. And if I wanna bring it here, I mean either case, even if it's column or row, if I do center, it just puts it right down in the center. It's just the question is whether the thing should be horizontal or vertical.
Justify content is align items for the horizontal direction. Right, so now we can center this horizontally with align items. And if we want to center this vertically, we can use justify content here. Right, so that's the tricky part here. It switches. These properties, well, horizontal, they switch from horizontal to vertical or vice versa when you use flex direction column. Right, justify content center is now vertical. Right, so this is very powerful. This is what will get you to the layout you want in like 99% of cases. And it's very important that you pay a little bit more attention to this concept of Flexbox. So we'll practice with that in the next project as well. All right, let's talk about positioning and specifically position absolute. This is something that's quite common. I'm going to remove the Flexbox stuff here. I'll keep the boxes because I think it's a good way to explain some other concepts as well. So we have this set.
I think this boxes exercise should be done by all CSS HTML beginners out there. It's like the Hello World project for web development. I personally think I'd be correct in saying that.
Set up here in the HTML, right? So we have one div, the parent element, and then we have these three boxes. Now let's say that I want this first box. I want this, maybe on the edge of this boxes, right? Maybe somewhere here on the edge. So I can actually select the first box, because with .box we're selecting all of them, right? Because they all have that class. However, and we'll talk more about advanced selectors. We can already use one just so you can see how that works. So we have .box, but now I want the first one, right? Or more specifically, the element with a class of box that is also a first child, right? So this element is a first child, right? In this div, this is the second child. This is the third child element. And let's say we want the first one, so we can say nth child, right? So if I want the first one, I can say 1 here. If I want the second one, I say 2, 3, right? Here we want the first one. So this will only select the element with a
I have known and used n child before.
Class of box that is a first child. Right, and to prove that to you, we can set the background color here. It will override yellow.
It doesn't use the normal zero indexing though, so that's a bit
The
of
bottom
a
should be purple.
confusion
Right, so now
there.
we say the first box should have a background color of purple. Right, so now this says purple. Okay, so let's talk about positioning. What we can do, what you will often see, is that people use position absolute. Right, so this has certain behavior. Let me actually add some space here.
In fact, does zero work? Zero doesn't do anything. Does negative one work? Nah, that doesn't work too.
So this, if I save here, let's actually see what we get if we just do this. So this looks very strange, but it's like the other box, is gone for some reason. And that's actually not what happened. What happens is that as soon as you use position absolute, this purple one is now position absolute. It means that it's taken out of the normal flow. So other elements will act as if it does not exist. Which actually, what happened here is that these two boxes, they moved upwards. Because it's like for them, the purple was gone. Right, so the other one is now sitting below
Try position absolute.
here, actually. That's why we don't see it. Now people use this because we can use the purple was gone. Right, so the other one is now sitting below here, actually. That's why we don't see it. Now people use this because we can use
The other one is sitting below this.
Purple was gone. Right, so the other one is now if it does not exist, which one is now position. It's like the other box, is gone for some reason, and that's actually not what happened. What happens is that as soon as you use position absolute, this purple one is now position absolute. It means that it's taken out of the normal flow. So other elements will act as if it does not exist.
Oh, I see. So the yellow one is sitting underneath this purple box.
Which actually, what happened here is that these two boxes, they moved upwards because it's like for them, the purple was gone. Right, so the other one is now sitting below here, actually. That's why we don't see it. Now people use this because we can use these offset properties. So for example, we can say we want this to sit 50 pixels from the right. Right, so now it sits here. You can see the other two the other one is back again.
It's like it doesn't follow any of the rules. It becomes kind of the rebel.
But it was sitting below there, right? But they're still here. But they're acting as if this one does not exist. So this one's not taking up any space anymore, right? And the reason we use this is because we can very precisely position an element somewhere we want. Now, when you use right 50 pixels, we're saying it should sit 50 pixels from the right. But the right of what?
It reminds me of the middle child meme.
Exactly. Right, so what happens is we have made this box position absolute. And if you say 50 pixels from the right, the default is actually it's gonna find the element that has, for example, position relative. This parent element does not have that, so it's gonna go to the next element.
Yeah,
and this one, the body also does not.
So you got this.
Right, but the right of what exactly? Right, so what happens is the other one is back again, but it was sitting below there, right? But they're still here, but they're acting as if this one does not exist. So this one's not taking up any space anymore, right? And the reason we use this is because we can very precisely position an element somewhere we want. Now, when you use right 50 pixels, we're saying it should sit 50 pixels from the right, but the right of what exactly? Right, so what happens is we have made this box position absolute, and if you say 50 pixels from the right, the default is actually it's gonna find the element that has, for example, position relative. This parent element does not have that, so it's going to go to the next element, and this one, the body also does not have it. So eventually it gets to gets somewhere up here, and so eventually it's just going to be like 50 pixels from the viewport. It's going to sit 50 pixels from the right from the viewport here. However, in practice, we want to have a specific element that is the reference point. So here, for example, we would want the boxes to be the reference point.
Oh, look at that! Our viewer count is increasing now. Never mind. It went back to 2 again.
It's 50 pixels from the right of that boxes element. So what you do in practice is you make this the reference point by saying position relative. Right, so relative to this element, it should sit 50 pixels from the right.
All right, so let's do that. Position relative. Okay, that's what relative is being used for.
Right, so then it sits 50 pixels from the right of this element. Right, we can also say 300 pixels from the top. Right, so then
well, I take that back. It's back at 4 again. Hello to all the new people who just came to the stream right now.
If we do 200 pixels,
how are you all?
Pixels, right, and you can very precisely decide where it should sit. Right, so that's position absolute and position relative. All right, let's talk about advanced.
And child. Oh, okay. To show this, he changed the top attribute to top property. Yeah. Okay.
Centering, because we've already centered something horizontally in the previous project. We've seen a couple of examples of that. Now, in practice, you also want to center vertically quite often, so both horizontally and vertically, and then it gets a little bit more advanced. So the first option that I use all the time is simply with flexbox. Right, so let me actually just remove this for now. Right, I'll keep the purple here because we'll use it in a second again. I'll also remove this.
Let's remove this. Remove these 3 declarations, because we have to use the right terminology from now on.
right? Let's say we want to center these boxes both horizontally and vertically, right? So what we can do, we've already seen this, and this is what I use all the time. This is the easiest way, in my opinion.
Both horizontally and
vertically.
Both horizontally and vertically. What does it mean
right?
by that?
So what we can do, we've already seen this, and this is what I use all the time. This is the easiest way, in my opinion. You use flexbox, right? So what you can do is simply say display flex, and now you are unlocking the flexbox functionalities. Now the default behavior is that the child elements, the flex items, they're going to sit on the same row, but that's okay. Let's say that doesn't matter to us, and you can change that with flex direction, right? If you don't like that. Okay, now to center the flex items horizontally here in this case, we can say justify content, right? Center, right? And then vertically, align items, center, right? This is the easiest way that you can center both horizontally and vertically an element or elements. All right, so we have another option, and that's with position absolute. So I'm gonna.
But doesn't it? Oh yeah. Oh, you mean just put it smack down right down in the middle? Yeah, of course we do justify align items. We set that to center, and we activate flexbox.
Move the flexbox here. So let's say we want to center the purple box in the center. We've already selected that here with an advanced selector. Now we can use position absolute for this as well, right? And what we can do is, well, we could say 200 pixels from the left, 150 pixels from the top. Now remember, 200 pixels from the left of what exactly, right? 150 pixels from the top, well, which top, right? So usually you want to be explicit about the reference point. So here we want the reference point to be the boxes element. So we make that position relative. Okay, so now it's sitting here somewhere, right? So we could also fine tune this. So we could say maybe a little bit more to the right, so a little bit more from the left, right? And you can make that. So we could also fine tune this. So we could say maybe a little bit more to the right, so a little bit more from the left, right?
Oh, I think he deactivated justify content and the line items.
Right? And you can make this a little bit less. You can fine tune it like this. And you can try to center this like that.
And display flex also.
However, there is an even easier way. So from the left, for example, what we can do is we can say 50% from the left.
That's a better way to do it.
Okay. And that is actually still not centered, right? Because it's not in the center right now, right? Horizontally, it's too far to the right. So it's sitting too much from the left. However, there is a trick here that you can use. Because what happens here is it takes 50% of the space and then it puts the element there. Right? So it takes
I see.
50% and then it puts the element there. However, we want the center of this element to coincide with the center of this element. So it's sitting too far, right? So we need to pull it back a little bit. So we're going to move the elements, right? So we have the transform property and we can move elements. Right? So we can do that with translate X in this case because it's a horizontal movement that we want.
So basically set this to 50% and we transform.
And it needs to be a negative number,
to,
right? So something like negative 10 pixels because that will move it to the left, right? Because it's sitting too far here, it should move a little bit to the left. Now the trick here is to use negative 50% because that will be in reference to its own size. So it's going to take half its own size, and that's the amount at which it will be moved back here.
New trick.
Right. So if I do this, now it's perfectly centered horizontally, right? We can use the same trick for the top, 50% from the top. Right, so now it's sitting 50% from the top, and then it puts the element there. That's too much. So just like previously, we need to pull it back a little bit.
Yeah.
So let me actually write it like this. It looks a little bit cleaner. It's not necessary functionally, but I think it looks better. So now we also want to move it vertically, right? So we can tack on another value here, translate y. And actually, we don't need to do that because we can also just use translate. And then the first value is for translate x, and the second value here is vertically. So here we can also use negative 50%. Right, so now it will move 50% to the left and 50% to the top. And that's also perfectly centered. Right? This is more advanced. You don't have to memorize this. We will practice with everything that we talk about here. So don't worry, but this is something that you're going to see sometimes. Right? Let's talk about advanced
You can use it when you need it.
And we actually already saw an example here with nth child. Let me actually remove this. Also position relative. Yeah, so here we used nth child. I could have also used first child. And then I can even remove this, right? Because it's the first one, so I don't need to specify the number one. It's the first child. Right, so we're selecting an element here that is a first child. Right? This is a first child element here, right? Because it's the child element of this one. Right? So we still have the purple background. Right? If I want to select this one, I can use nth child again. And now it's the second child. Right, now this one is purple. Right? So another one is nth of type. So this is useful. This is by tag basically, because we can have other types of tags in here. Here we only have divs. We can also have like headings in here or paragraphs. So sometimes you want to be specific about which type. So maybe we want to select the third div. Right? So we can say nth of type 3. Or the element with a class of box that is the third of its type. Right? In this case, it's a div, so it's going to be the third div. Right? So now this one has a purple background. Right? So these are some more advanced selectors. These are really all the ones that you need, especially nth child. I think this is quite helpful sometimes. All right, let's talk about CSS variables, or also called custom properties. So let's say in a real world project, if you have some kind of branding colors, right? So maybe McDonald's, for example, has like the red and yellow colors, I believe. Right. So on the McDonald's website, I bet if you go there, you'll see those colors a lot. Right. So any kind of brand, and actually not even just a professional brand, like any type of website usually wants to stick to a consistent, set of colors. Right. So you may have like an accent color. Right. So you use an accent color to draw attention to something. Right. So you're going to use that color all over the place. Right. So for example, maybe that color is a particular hex code. Right. I'm just going to write some gibberish here. We'll see what that color is. I'm not even sure if this is actually a color. Okay. And let's say that this is our accent color. Right. So I want to use it here. I want to use it here. I want to use it everywhere. However, it's a bit annoying that we have to keep remembering this hex code, right? It's a difficult one. I have to keep remembering it. I have to copy it from somewhere and then paste it all over the place. And let's say that we want to change it later. Now we have to go through all of those places and we have to change it, right? That's a lot of work. So what people use, in those situations is a so-called custom property, right? So we have height, that's a property, width is a property. We can also sort of create our own properties. And people typically do it as follows. So what we can do is, for example, select the HTML element, right? So HTML is just an element, which is a div here. We can select it, right? And we can actually select it by its tag, because there is only one HTML element. So people typically select this just by tag. And here we can create that custom property. So we use 2 dashes and then the name. So we can call it accent. And then the value, the actual color, right? So now anywhere in the HTML element, we can use this, custom property, also called a variable, right? So now when we go down here, right here, I want to use it for the background color. I can say var, right? Because people also call this a variable, and then the name, dash accent.
All right, so we change this to variable accent.
Right, so if we do this, they are still this color, right? But now we've created a so-called variable in CSS. And we'll see this in the next project as well. Now, what people sometimes also do is, instead of doing this with the HTML selector, they use :root. So this will select the root element, which in an HTML document is HTML. So this is actually pretty much the same as HTML, right? But people like doing this for, if you ever have a clash, and then maybe later on you have another selector for HTML, and then if you have accidentally given this another color, right? So now you have a clash, right? Then this one will win, basically. This is an advanced concept, but people also call this that this has higher specificity, which is more of an advanced concept. But basically, in practice, it's the same.
Higher class of order.
Just HTML. But people like to be fancy sometimes, so they use a more complicated selector. It works.
That's the real truth. People want to be fancy and make God complicated.
Anyway. So that's CSS custom properties, also called CSS variables. All right, almost finished here. Just a couple of concepts. So now I want to talk about before and after pseudo elements. Let me actually remove this. Oh, now they don't have any. Let me quickly give them their color. Yeah, so let's say that in front of the boxes we have a heading. So here, beautiful boxes, right? Just a silly example. Right, so I have beautiful boxes as text. Now, quite often, actually, let's give this a class. I'll call it heading. And then we can select it here. It's in quite close, so let's add some margin on the bottom. Quite.
Heading. Let's add a margin. What? How many? 50 pixels.
Often with these headings, you want to have like a color below the text, right? Or maybe even in front of the text. Right? The color is just, stylistic reasons, so it has no functional purpose necessarily, but it looks good to do that. So
it looks good to do what?
It's in quite close, so let's add some margin on the bottom. Quite often with these headings, you want to have like a color below the text, right? Or maybe even in front of the text. Right? The color is just, stylistic reasons, so it has no functional purpose necessarily, but it looks good to do that. So what you could try to do is say text decoration underline. Right? Now here you get
all right.
A line that's the entire width here, right? Let's say we only want it to be like, maybe a little bit less. It should be in the center. So for something like this, we could create a so-called pseudo element, right? So we could create, we can create elements here in HTML, right? I've created an element now. However, we can also create them from CSS actually. So what you can do is you can say heading, and then 2 colons, and then before or after, right? Let's say before. And then here, you have to use a content property. This is actually meant for adding text. Right, so I can say content test. Let's actually see what we get. Right, so now I have added the word test here, not from our HTML, but actually through
CSS, huh?
Through CSS. Right, so you can do this, if you want to add text for whatever reason through CSS. I can't think of a practical example right now, so it's not very common. People actually use this for a different reason, which is not for adding text, but for adding like little scribbles or like little lines every now and then, which is actually not very practical to do in HTML. So we're going to have no text here, but you still need a content property, otherwise it won't work. So what we want is just like a little bar of color below the heading. So we can say it should be 5 pixels tall, should have a width of 75 pixels. And the background color should be, let's see, we'll make it, I'll use a built-in color here, dark golden rod. Now, these two elements are inline level elements by default. You cannot set the height of an inline level element. So I'm going to convert this to a block level element with display block. Let's see what we get. Right, so now we are not creating text here, but now we've just created this little bar of color, right? And actually we want this to sit below the text.
Right.
So we also have another one called after. Let's see if that works. Yeah, so now it comes after the text. Right, so now it's sitting after the text.
Actually, what does it look like in the DevTools part of thing? There we go. That's what those things in the DevTools for. Well,
And yeah, now we can proceed to center this basically here, right? Any of the centering mechanisms we can try. But basically, these are pseudo elements, right? So we'll see an example of how to center this in the actual project. I just quickly want to show you how these pseudo elements work. You can add text, but in practice, people use it for these types of artistic additions. We could create an HTML element for this, right? Instead of using pseudo elements, we could create an HTML element and style that HTML element. But in practice, people like to use this because then we don't have.
oh, we have check back. So what's new, you ask? Well, we started with or were you there when we started intermediate? I can't remember. Anyway, we started intermediate HTML and CSS, and yeah, learned about flexboxes and stuff. We also completed the other the what was it, the site. You know what? Let me show you. Actually, where should I go to look into that? Event. Yeah, there you go. It's not responsive, but we'll make it responsive apparently at the end. Yeah, pseudo elements before and after. I also covered that. I've always wondered what they stood for whenever I use the what's it, the dev tools, and now I know. You learn something new every day.
Have to clutter up our HTML with empty elements. Okay, so we'll practice with this. All right, so we're almost finished. Let's quickly talk about this stacking order. So sometimes elements will overlap. For example, if we are going to use position absolute with this purple box.
Oh yeah, and this and that. I was just saying that this exercise with the black box, the inner boxes should be everyone's hello world project, and when they want to enter the web development front end space.
Could move it a little bit upwards, so it's sitting on top of the yellow box. And let me actually give each box some margin on the bottom so we can better distinguish them if they have the same color. Okay, so now let's move this purple box a little bit upwards to sort of overlap with this one, and we'll see which one will sit on top. So we can use position absolute, right? And we can say something like it should sit 100 pixels from the top, right? At the top of what?
Top of boxes, right?
Well, let's make it boxes.
Okay, we already have that.
And we can say something like
that. So let's add the property right now. Do you play any games as such, Checker? I mean, you did mention that a game which I couldn't pronounce, but do you play anything other than that?
Choose it 100 pixels from the top, right? At the top of what? Well, let's make it boxes. Right.
Right,
let's see what we got. Okay, so now this purple box is overlapping with this yellow box, and the browser has decided that it's the purple box who should sit on top.
The purple box has decided to be the middle child, if you know that meme.
One of the reasons is this. One of the reasons, well, this is very advanced, but there are certain things that the browser looks at to decide which one should sit on top. So if the element comes later in the HTML.
Oh, you don't play Doe, or at least not anymore. Okay, you play World of Warcraft. It's abbreviated as WoW, right? I've heard of it quite a lot, but I've never actually played it. I know it's or I don't know if it's still really popular. It would be, but yeah. It's so I think you're more of a strategy based gamer, I would say, right? Yeah, I know it's I might be comparing Porsche with a budget car by throwing this comparison at you, but would it be like Clash of Clans, World of Warcraft? I guess, yeah, I think you're more of a League of Legends, like those strategy-based games guy, huh? Is an MMORPG. I've heard of MMORPG. It's like the one with story or without story. World of Warcraft. Isn't it this? Isn't this like League of Legends where you do strategy stuff and defeat the other guys, and you had to team up with mates called guild. Yeah, exactly. Basically, strategy based, right? I think you're that person who loves strategy based games. League of Legends is MOBA. I need to get my gaming abbreviations in order in check. I haven't heard of MOBA to be frank with you, but simplified doesn't necessarily mean easier. And there's an entire fan base around these two games.
Well, it will sit on
Isn't League of Legends owned by the same people who did who made Valorant? I was about to say Epic Games, but that's obviously wrong. Valorant made by Riot Games. Yeah, is that did they make yeah, they made Riot Games made League of Legends.
on top, right? So here we have this is the second box. The third box comes later.
Yeah, I mean that is different. Of course, I was just saying like the company who made it was the same company. Oh, gaming studio. I guess that's the official term. Yeah, League of Legends is like Dota. Yeah, I guess that's a better analogy you can give.
So if everything is equal, it will sit on top. Another rule is if this element has the position
I don't think whether I've asked, are you a working professional by chance? So if you don't mind sharing, that is.
And the other one does not, the positioned element will also sit on top if everything's equal. Right, so if we make this also a positioned element, right, so the default value is actually static, not important, but if we make it relative, now this is also a so-called positioned element, meaning it has a different value for position than the default one, and relative here won't do anything, it's just a value that we can use here for stacking order purposes. But now they are both positioned, right? However, the third one still comes later in the HTML. So the purple one, the third one is still sitting on top. However, we can also use z-index. So if we give this
z-index is just to pull things back and forward, how you use things on the video editor. What's that? League of Legends is like Dota. Everyone is, to be frank. There, I guess things like expert, noob, medium, they are. I mean, I was about to say they are subjective, but yes, for some things you can put for some areas they are not subjective, but for dev, I would say that things like being an expert, no one's an expert. Everyone's no one knows no one knows everything. There's I don't know what the name of the curve is. Dev curve. You know everything and you don't know any. Let's see. Uh, what's the name of this curve called? I forgot. There's a huge research and things given. I know everything. Dev curve. Let's do that. I know everything. Dev curve and then realization hits and stuff. Okay, this is the what I was looking for. Dunning-Kruger effect. So let's see. And development. 1 second, I'll read your message. Let me just got this. Yeah. There you go. No one knows. No one knows everything. Everyone's just in the game there. Hanging on. Many people are encyclopedias when it comes to that, but way less than people pretend to be. Yeah, exactly. Most of it is pretend. I know that for sure. But every dev would pass through this. I don't know for other fields. Apparently it applies to other fields too, but I can say for sure every developer or anybody in the software field would go through this effect for sure. At the beginning, it's like I know everything in the world, and then you just hit rock bottom, and then you're somewhere in the middle.
This is a number of any number like 5, and this one a z-index of 3. Right, so this is a lower z-index.
I bet there's more to it than I thought, but huh. I mean, yeah. You know what? I would say that but as you learn more and more things, you'll start to get more and more um in sync with this curve over here.
Next, right, and this one.
Oh yeah, what is the
Now,
index again?
this one a z-index of 3. Right, so this is a lower z-index, right, and this one. And now,
So the lower one will get.
now the yellow box is on top, right?
Oh, okay, because it has a higher Z index. Then you have Z index 3. Yep.
So the higher z-index.
What I dislike is that no one does. You always, it's an endless ocean out there. In a way, it's good to have that feeling. Yeah, exactly, precisely.
Wins here. Right, so this is very complicated, but the browser has to decide which element should sit on top. So it's going to look at position, it's going to look at the z-index. Right, so we'll practice with that as well. All right, last concept I want to discuss here before we build another project is responsiveness. So in the previous project,
I personally think that if you want to be good at development, and this might be a hot take, but you need to be you need to know like bits of like a little of everything in tech, but you also need to specialize in some areas.
we talked about this. The problem is that it will not look good on mobile or tablet, right? So we coded that project on a wide viewport, right? So it's going to look good on laptop and desktop computers. But if somebody goes to that website on a mobile phone, that's a problem, right? So we want to make our projects responsive, and we use so-called media queries for this. So this is a very silly example, of course, but let's actually see how this would work. So you would do right-click, inspect. This is what you would typically use. Right, so you see the inspector tools here. I'm going to move this a little bit to the side. And then here we have our project again, right? So what you would do, and this is what people call the desktop first approach, right? So first you're going to make it look good on your own computer or laptop or desktop. And then you're going to make it smaller and smaller. And you will try to make it look good on mobile and tablet, right? Some people prefer mobile first. So they would actually start by making it look good on mobile and then make it look good on wider viewports.
Depends on what app you're creating, isn't it? How exactly was that done again? You go. Wait, which part did he go into? Or the mobile button thingy? Oh yeah. There we go. Yeah, we can sell the device here too. Yep. Anyhow. What's that? As a self-taught, the bit of everything works fine. It's hard to specialize because if you read because it reduces your options when it comes to find a job. Once you have a job, specializing is fine. I guess yeah, because actually no, because I think it's easier to personally I would say because I myself am a self-taught. I guess everyone in the world is self-taught these days, but I started specializing in a field, and that's because I specialized, because I took a niche, is how I kind of landed my first job. And yeah, for me, it was the other way around though. But I guess it might be because I was a freelancer. If you look at it from an HR perspective, right? From a if from a, I would like to call these jobs regular jobs, 9 to 5 jobs, usual. I guess they would want people who know a bit of everything, right? Because obviously you learn, they'll take you in, they'll train you, they'll teach you what there is to in that job. You learn quite a lot in your first job. Yeah, of course there are a bazillion amount of variables involved in that. I like how we use parameters. The word parameters.
Are fine. It depends on your team. It depends, on your target user. Is your target user on mobile phone all the time? Maybe you want to start with mobile first. Right, now technically it shouldn't matter, but in practice people do tend to make things look a little bit better with the approach that they start with. Right, so if you have desktop first approach, usually your desktop version is going to look a little bit better than mobile. That's just how it works in practice. All right, so we have desktop first approach. Now technically it shouldn't matter, but in practice people do tend to make things look a little bit better with the approach that they start with. Right, so if you have desktop first approach, usually your desktop version is going to look a little bit better than mobile. That's just how it works in practice. All right, so let's say we have some kind of project and now we want to make it responsive. Right, so what you would do is you would make the viewport. Right, this is the visible area of the website. You would make it smaller and smaller until at some point things start to break, or there clearly could be a change. Right? So at some point here, let's say right as this box starts to hit the side of the viewport here, or right before it, let's say 510 pixels. Right, so this is at 510 pixels width of the viewport. Right, so a device that is wider than that would see something like this. Right, a device that is even wider would see something like this. Right, a mobile phone may see something like this right now, and we don't want that. Right, so for these narrower devices, we have to change it up a little bit from here onwards. Let's say, because here it really starts to look bad. So let's say at 515 pixels and smaller, we want to reduce the size of this black box, this parent element. So what we can do is we can use a media query. So it looks a little bit strange. So we say add media.
This is another thing which I have seen in HTML, not HTML. I've seen in CSS, but yeah, in HTML, because that's how I see it through the dev tools. But I didn't know what it was used for. Learn something new every day.
And then there's a condition. So for the viewports that are at most, that have the maximum width is 515 pixels, then we want to reduce.
Would it be different for me though, because I'm using my resolution is set to that of a normal 1920 1080, although I use a widescreen for streaming purposes. Yeah. I would be interested to know what are the other methods though.
The width of this box's rectangular, right? So we have to select
Oops,
it.
my
right?
camera is about to die now.
It's always 500 pixels, but if the viewport is 515 pixels or smaller, maybe it should be 300
pixels. It has that low charge.
Right, so if we do this and now refresh, you can see that this.
But that does CSS function like I have to take a look at what that is. Cam? What's that? My camera is officially dead now. Clamp. Clamp. CSS is another function. Oh, the font size of this text varies depending on the base font of the page and size of the viewport. So it minimum value, or rather than using media queries, you'll use this, huh?
Box has become smaller, right? Because what we're saying here is that if the
Okay, that's good. I'll probably be ending up using that anyways if it's a commonly used
viewport is at most 515.
Anyway, let's start with this media part of things. So do max. Let me also connect my phone. Gain a bit of charge before. Is that charging? Oh, but you can't. Yeah, it is charging.
Pixels. So apply the styles in here. This is like a mini style sheet, right? So we select it and then we have declarations.
So what does it say? If the max width, if it goes beyond this maximum, you change this. dot boxes, and we set that to 300 300 pixels.
Right, so if it's wider than this does not apply, right? Only when it's smaller, at most 515 pixels. So if it's wider than this, right, we just have that normal size.
Huh. So, what? Oh, I see. As it touches 515, the width of boxes suddenly increases, right? So boxes by default, no, by default it's 500 pixels. Oh, okay, and as soon as it goes beneath that value, then it changes to 300 pixels. So it's the upper end.
Size again, right? But if it's at most 515, this is applied. Right, so this is responsiveness in a nutshell. We will practice with this in the next project as well.
In a real project, you continue making the viewport smaller and smaller, and yeah, you just add a lot of media queries, which is gonna get really cluttersome. And I guess that's where you use that clamp function, which you mentioned, isn't it? I think this is a good part to end the stream. We'll be continuing with it in the next one where we'll do the artist finder project. Let me just play the video for a bit.
Right, so
I
we go to the
wish
next project because we're
my
gonna...
camera wasn't dead at this moment. I could have just captured that outro, especially since we hit our follower goal right now. Come on, phone, you can do this. But honestly, you know what? I'll let it charge for a bit. Till then, I'll just walk through the video a bit, or we can chat or something like
use everything
that. I
we learned,
guess.
the basics, fundamentals, but also these intermediate concepts, and you're going to build a beautiful real-world project from scratch. It's really the highest value asset of this course, so make sure you go through it. And also, I will release more courses, more projects on this YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe and like the video. By the way, if you're confused by anything, if you're intimidated by anything, completely normal. Every developer goes through this. Don't be discouraged. Just push through, and you'll plug those holes in your knowledge as you go about your developer journey. Right?
Oh,
So I will
what's
see you in
that?
the next
What? Just send a link over there, haven't you? Uh-huh. Can I find myself on pitch? So we're gonna run an experiment now. Actually, I just can use my chat is on obvious. I can use that. Am I on pitch? Is the question. I guess I need to scroll all the way up. Okay, somewhere around here. Okay, let me just control F and no, there we go. Okay, I'm gonna mute it so that the thing does. Okay, I'm just gonna send the link. Yeah, it is simple. I could have just typed it out. Okay, thank you, Chekan. Thank you for that. What length CSS unit should you use? Oh, we can try. Huh. You know what? Like what was I about to say? You're right. There are quite a lot of units out there, right? Zoom in, zoom out. What is this flowchart? Oh, okay. For font size, which of these are you selecting to declare the font size? Using the body. Do you want it to be responsive? If no, use rem. If yes, use clamp. Okay. I guess everything just leads to clamp, doesn't it? And what about in this section? What is this section for? Oops. Yeah. Spacing. What are you adding spacing to? Do you want this space to be okay? Clamp is here again. Is it here though? guess. Well, it's not here, but no, it is here because it connects to here. What is this for? Flex or grid stuff. You know, this is a very useful chart. How did you find this? Did you just it is the best. That cheat sheet is life saving. I agree. Like if you do, if you are someone who does web development every minute of every day, this is gonna be life saving, isn't it? And I think my camera is also gonna be up in a bit. You know, I'm gonna save this link. Thank you for this. This is gonna be a really useful asset I can use. Whatunit.com. It's one of those websites out there like epoch converter. What is it called? I just do a timestamp convert and it pops up. One of those niche websites out there which are pretty damn useful for developers. There's another website which I occasionally use. Seems like I can't send that there, but I mean, yeah, epoch converter. You can just search for it. That's another one which I use. With that being said, is my phone alive? Is the question. And let's see. And there we go. I am back live. What's that? If you can master all these properties, you can do everything. It's from Kevin Power. I want that name. It'll probably be a YouTuber that I check out. Kevin Power. Huh. Yeah, he this person and I don't know the name of the other one. CSS King or something like that. CSS King, I think it's that the name. CSS King. Yeah, there you go. Web Dev Simplified. Yeah, this person and this one. I guess they're the friendiers of front end development on YouTube out there. Yeah, most popular CSS YouTuber. I think I don't know. I think it was way years back. I think or something like I think I went through one of Web Dev Simplified course. Yeah, this channel would be a lifesaver. I hope, and if you're a full time developer, I mean web development developer, web developer. What am I saying? Okay. Anyhow, I think it's time for me to end this stream. And today is a special day since we finally hit our follower goal. You know, we need to increase it and increase it to some other number. The one you're watching by grade is very qualitative. I know, right? I'm really enjoying the course. It's pretty good. Sure thing, and special thanks to Checkham for staying around, chatting around, and I hope you had a nice time. And again, once more, thank you for the follow. And that being said, take care. I'll see you all in the next one.